Welcome to the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels that they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across a table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. In today's episode, we're going to finish up the chapter focus on step 12, doing a deep dive into step 12 of the Alcoholics Anonymous program. And the 12th step is really focused on understanding how to engage with and work with other alcoholics once you have made it through the first 11 steps of the AA program. We are really empowered and encouraged to turn around and provide and give service to others. And I'm going to kickstart this episode with another little primer. So I had mentioned at the top of the episode, episode 51, that these episodes that cover the 12th step are actually not, they don't have my usual focus with regards to thinking about and delivering the message to myself in my lowest points and in the throes of a battle with detox and with alcoholism. But instead, this chapter 12 is really to shed light for those that might be loved ones of addicts and alcoholics about how we as recovered addicts and alcoholics are instructed to engage with and approach those that are struggling. I think getting an understanding and being transparent about how those of us that have found a solution are instructed to engage can definitely be helpful and enlightening for those that might be at a total loss for how to deal with a loved one that's struggling. For today's episode, I do want to detail something that I've never actually shared before, but I had an instance before I found a solution to my alcoholism where I actually did engage with someone who, I'll be honest, he was really the first and only person that I have declared and called an alcoholic. And I think that shows my ignorance and inability at the time to actually be helpful in that exact situation, to deliver some context and the reason for delivering this context. The last portion of this book really talks about how to make ourselves available to struggling alcoholics. And so I want to talk about this experience that was basically the opposite of that, where I tried to engage with and help someone who is struggling while I was struggling myself. And the only way I can like really portray how that experience went, it was like myself drowning in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of a raging storm, shouting instructions to another man hundreds of yards away on how to tread water. Reflecting back on this time period of my life, it's pathetic. And I only use that word because it's myself, and so I'm a little more self-critical, but it truly was pathetic and just ignorant about how I went about it, how I thought that I could help someone. Well, myself, I was struggling, and I had no grasp of my own issues. And so yeah, we had moved to Boise here in 2019. I was actually on one of my white knuckle like sober stints. I think I was sober around 6 months when we moved here to Boise. Anyway, to cut a very, very long story short, we made some friends in the apartment complex that we lived in who took note of some comments that Alyssa and I made about not having alcohol around at the house. And then finally just point blank asked like if I drank, and I said, no, I'm taking a break. Like I did somehow find it in me, to be honest, that like I kind of struggled. But I framed it like I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure it out. Anyway, it winds up that, because of this knowledge about my own struggle and about, me talking about having 6, 7, 8 months, whatever it was at the time of sobriety under my belt, I got called in as the husband, the man in this relationship really started to tailspin. And his wife called on me. They wound up moving out of the apartment complex that we were living in. But I got called in numerous times, and I got engaged with his family. They got my number, and they were calling me when he would have struggles at work, and he was coming home drunk in the middle of the day, just drinking. And so, yeah, I thought it was the valiant thing to do to inject myself and try to help this person who I saw as a friend at that time. And all it did in the grand scheme of things was tip me over the edge. I was right on the cusp of having my alcoholism really run rampant and out of control. And that experience, as I struggled to help someone else struggling, just cascaded into me picking up and learning some just really destructive and abhorrent behavior. When it came to my drinking, it's where the shame and the line really came in and started playing out in a very strong manner. We did wind up distancing ourselves and disengaging from that friendship, but the damage was done with how I had tried to engage and help when I was nowhere near fit and ready. And so that's important as we step into the final parts of this chapter here on on step 12, how to engage with others. Because I said this in the last episode, but I'm going to repeat it. There's a saying in AA: you cannot give that which you do not have. And this concept is so easy to connect with when we talk about things like hard assets. Think of a family member passing down a house at a time that they die. It's like, well, yeah, of course, they have to own the house in order, and they get to decide like who gets it. Like you can't just give something to someone that you don't, and from an asset standpoint, that you don't actually own. The harder area to identify and connect with this is in the realm of like healing and like spiritual connection and understanding. There are there's so much malicious intent, and there's so much risk exposure in this space, because you don't really know what that, if they're not offering it up, anyone can lay out some great sound bites and sayings that resonate with you, but you don't know where they're extracting that, especially in today's age of social media. It's really disgusting when you start looking out there and you see people putting out these thoughts and, concepts. And it's like, well, where the hell did they even come up with it? And so that is why I am so hyper-focused on anytime I say something, anytime I stress a lesson or a learning, I tie it back to an experience. And I really hold myself to that standard, because it's like, if I didn't live through it, if I didn't grow from direct experience, I'm not going to talk about it. And I'm not going to portray it as something that someone else should follow and some activity that someone should do when I myself have not done it. It's just, that's not honest. That's not the manner in which I'm approaching this work. And so anyway, all of that will be relevant as we get to the reading here. So to the book again, chapter 7, about the 12th step, working with others. See your man alone, if possible. At first, engage in general conversation. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. If he is not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit, but say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. If he is in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you. being careful not to moralize or lecture. If his mood is light, tell him humorous stories of your escapades. Get him to tell some of his. And the note coming out of the book, the note that I have here, and I've said it over and over, but my mantra, kind of my approach is go first and then listen. Be willing to offer your experience, your journey first, and then as soon as someone else starts opening up, I really work at just shutting up and listening. One other note that I want to drop in here. I think one of the biggest misunderstandings of the work that I've done up to this point is feedback that I will sometimes get about, wow, it's incredible to see someone who's being so vulnerable. And I will be honest, I hate that word. It's the wrong word. And it is actually not technically correct. And it has a lot to do with this opening couple paragraphs about how you approach a conversation with someone who has just expressed willingness to listen and engage. It is not vulnerability. Vulnerability is a weakness that can utterly destroy you. I do not talk about any vulnerabilities that I might have. What I do is I speak in a manner that is honest and humble. I am as humble as I can try to be when I talk about my past experiences. Going through the step work has allowed me to wash away and lose the fear of judgment of a lot of the thought patterns, a lot of the behaviors that I have portrayed in the past. And I know that by talking about those things that I have so often in the past hidden from, that others can see themselves in those stories, in those experiences. It is honesty and humility. It is not vulnerability. So don't go into these conversations thinking about admitting just all of your weaknesses and being oh so vulnerable. I'm just going to say it. It's bullshit. Vulnerability is bullshit. It's all about honesty and humility. Now, random tirade over. Back to the book. When he sees you know all about the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Coming out of the book, the note I have here, and obviously a bunch of the work and time, energy, and effort that I pour into this, normalize the word alcoholism. Normalize talking about yourself as an alcoholic. I'm feeling another little tangential tirade coming up, but I get the push. I connect with people who have a real reason for pushing the substance use disorder narrative. I personally find it as a large excuse for lacking the courage and ability to face up to the word alcoholism. It's insane to say, but it truly is. You give a word more power by skirting around it, by not saying it, by not looking it directly in the face and calling it what it is. So I don't care what the medical literature pushes one way or the other. I'm an alcoholic. I will always refer to myself as an alcoholic, and I will only refer to myself as an alcoholic. But I will use that word over and over to describe myself as I engage with others, to normalize it as much as possible and to show them that there is not power in a word like that. Back to the book. Tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick. Give him an account of the struggles that you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. If he is alcoholic, he will understand you at once. He will match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own. I'm going to come out of the book here. This is one of the coolest experiences, and cool might be the wrong word to describe the scenario, but when you start going back and forth with someone and you start realizing that there's a synergy and a resonance between two addicts and alcoholics as they sit and discuss the thought patterns of behavior, the insanity that comes along with this disease, it is so powerful to see some of that like fear and isolation drop away from their eyes. You can see again the softening of their face and just the lighting in their eyes come back as they realize maybe for the first time ever that they're not alone in their insanity, or seeming insanity, I should say. Back to the book. Show him from your own experience how the queer mental condition surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the willpower. And be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusion. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him that possibly he can. But insist that if he is severely afflicted, there may be little chance he can recover by himself. I'm going to come out of the book and once again say, from the time I have entered into active recovery, I've never called anyone else an alcoholic. I am only concerned about myself, and I don't have any right to ever call someone else an alcoholic. That is a decision, and that is a conclusion that I am firmly of the belief that only the individual can come to. And in terms of healing, there is no healing if the individual does not truly believe it. Back to the book. Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. Coming out of the book here, this is a bit of a side thought, but talking about alcoholism as a fatal malady actually hits on a topic of conversation I had with a friend this morning, and that has to do with the concept, the farce, in my mind, of the high-functioning alcoholic. I believe alcoholism should be viewed as a near certain fatal disease if the work is not put in. And the concept of a high-functioning alcoholic, like the way I've started to think about it and describe it, it's like, well, it's just a person whose number hasn't come up. Like maybe they have some traits that make it such that whether they drink one beer or 24 beers, they can operate, kind of at the same level. I know people who have that trait. Like you wouldn't tell the difference if they had 24 or 1. But regardless, there is still on every alcoholic's timeline, there's still a clicking or a running timer when you don't know when the end is. And this is my challenge to you. Have you ever heard of anyone who has died of in some manner of alcoholism or a consequence of alcoholism that people refer to as a high-functioning alcoholic? I guarantee you the answer to that is no. Someone can be a high-functioning alcoholic until they're not. As soon as they die, that script flips. Back to the book. I'm skipping ahead here. I'm going to read a little bit of an intro or a bit of a primer, like a half sentence. But basically what this is talking about is the curiosity that you can pique and strike in someone that is early in the stage of recovery. So to the book, he has become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your concept of God. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and that he live by spiritual principles. You had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. There is no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues, no matter what your own convictions are. And this is coming out of the book. This is really, I think, imperative. It's like the solution, and all of us that have worked the 12 steps know this. The solution is spiritual. The root cause of the problem of drinking is a spiritual malady. I was talking to a friend the other day who he is a nutritionist, and we were just chatting about like root causes, and just how often he sees in his practice sort of the general consensus kind of stop a root cause analysis at some like symptomatic trigger, instead of drawing that root cause analysis all the way back to its actual source. And then, our medical practice is like treat the symptom forward instead of driving the conversation and the analysis further back to the actual root cause that would actually take care of everything downstream of it. That's the same thing with alcoholism. Like, you could see the consequences, the behavior, the thought pattern that were in, if you just did like a cursory root cause analysis of my situation, it's like, yeah, I drink too much. Like, I go to alcohol for almost everything. But if you take it one step further, you will find that I had, as a root cause, I had emotional immaturity and a lack of fitness, as well as I was spiritually bankrupt. And when I solved the spiritual aspect, everything else was able to heal. Now, back to the book. Make it clear that he is not under pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, for he has helped you more than you have helped him. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. Maybe you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to follow your suggestions. And really, the root of this is like getting the person to the start, getting to them to a point where they can start asking themselves, well, am I really being honest about my behavior, about the manageability of my life? And the next step is, am I starting to be open to doing something different that might actually lead to a solution? And then again, this step after that is, am I willing to do anything to get after and chase that solution? Back to the book. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any more moral or spiritual hilltop. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they worked with you. Coming out of the book here, I think this is such a huge point. Never lecture, never talk down. Again, just like the theme of this chapter and this step in my mind should be just speak from your experience. Just be honest and be humble about your experience, and only talk to that which you know and which you have lived through. Back to the book. If he is sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. After doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. If he thinks he can do the job in some other way or prefers some other spiritual approach, encourage him to follow his own conscience. We have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that worked with us. And I'm going to be jumping ahead quite a few pages here. Again, the entirety of this chapter gets very, very tactical with how to approach the other or the new person to recovery and work them through that. So here, jumping ahead to the closing pieces of this chapter, back to the book. Let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. This just isn't so. In some cases, the wife will never come back for one reason or another. Remind the prospect that his recovery is not dependent upon people. It is dependent upon his relationship with God. We have seen men get well whose families have not returned at all. We have seen others slip when the family comes back too soon. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hand were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. Assuming we are spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. People have said we must not go where liquor is served. We must not have it in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. We must avoid moving pictures which show drinking scenes. We must not go into bars. Our friends must hide their bottles if we go to their houses. We mustn't think or be reminded about alcohol at all. Our experience shows that this is not necessarily so. We meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. There is something the matter with his spiritual status. His only chance for sobriety would be some place like the Greenland ice cap, and even there an Eskimo might turn up with a bottle of scotch and ruin everything. I'm going to pause there. This is a moment that I had that I've detailed here before. Driving home from rehab to my house. It's a 15-minute drive. There were 6 gas stations at 6 a.m. on Monday morning in Idaho where we could have stopped and I could have bought my substance of choice. And I recognized that. And I had a holy shit moment. I better figure out how to live with this stuff always and constantly around me. Hey folks, I just wanted to drop in with an ask for help. If you are enjoying and finding value from this episode, please take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and a written review. Whether this episode is allowing you to connect with the struggles that a loved one may be going through, or allowing you to see yourself through the story of someone else, the ratings and reviews allow the work to be made more readily available for those who are searching for a solution. Love to you all for the incredible support of this work and the meaning and hope that it provides. Back to the book. In our belief, any scheme of combating alcoholism which proposes to shield the sick man from temptation is doomed to failure. If the alcoholic tries to shield himself, he may succeed for a time, but he usually winds up with a bigger explosion than ever. We have tried these methods. These attempts to do the impossible have always failed. So our rule is not to avoid a place where there is drinking if we have a legitimate reason for being there. To a person who has had experience with an alcoholic, this may seem like tempting providence, but it isn't. Therefore, ask yourself on each occasion, have I any good social, business, or personal reason for going to this place? Or am I expecting to steal a little vicarious pleasure from the atmosphere of such places? Be sure you are on solid ground. Be sure you are on solid spiritual ground before you start, and that your motive in going is thoroughly good. Do not think of what you will get out of the occasion. Think of what you can bring to it. And I'm going to pause here and come out of the book for a moment. And so this is talking about just your engagement with everyday life. You know, early in recovery, I was on a work trip and the team booked out a dinner at a brewery. And there were people there that knew that I was in recovery, but it was just an instance where it was so clear. And again, another example of in recovery, you are going to have to engage with these environments in these scenarios. And it is often in these environments and in these scenarios where there are people that you can serve, that you can help. And so we should not be fearful of entering into it and engaging with others in those scenarios. But you have to come back to honesty. Should you be there? Do you have to be there? Is there a genuine good reason for you to be there? The example that I always use, and I talk about with my wife a lot, like as I do travel with work, because work travel was always one space and time where I really could let things go and consume. And it's like, you know, I have absolutely no reason to go up to an airport bar and sit there and eat a dinner alone. Why tempt it? Why even expose myself or put myself in that situation? And again, I'm very much aware, like I haven't not had an urge or a desire to drink since entering recovery, but still I recognize, why would I ever put myself in that space? It's not worth it. There are other scenarios where it is worth engaging in environments where alcohol is going to be around. And again, this is the freedom that you get in entering into recovery, is you don't have to be fearful and run away and hide and shield yourself from those scenarios. Back to the book, the final few paragraphs. If it is a happy occasion, try to increase the pleasure of those there. If a business occasion, go and attend to your business enthusiastically. Let your friends know they are not to change their habits on your account. At a proper time and place, explain to all your friends why alcohol disagrees with you. If you do this thoroughly, few people will ask you to drink. While you were drinking, you were withdrawing from life little by little. Now you are getting back into the social life of this world. Don't start to withdraw again just because your friends drink liquor. Your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximal helpfulness to others. So never hesitate to go anywhere if you can be helpful. We are careful never to show intolerance or hatred of drinking as an institution. Experience shows that such an attitude is not helpful to anyone. Every new alcoholic looks for this spirit among us and is immensely relieved when he finds we are not witch burners. A spirit of intolerance might repel alcoholics whose lives could have been saved. We would not even do the cause of temperate drinking any good, for not one drinker in 1,000 likes to be told anything about alcohol by one who hates it. Coming out of the book before the final two paragraphs here, this is absolutely true. Like I really hope I don't think I've been perfect in the building out of the work here on chapter 3 Stigma, but I really do try to portray like I have no issues with alcohol, with people consuming alcohol that are normal. Like I like it's their decision. I just truly can't express how little I care. I don't want to necessarily rid the world of alcohol, and I certainly would not, come down on someone for drinking, especially when it might be someone I can engage with who is struggling, because I was in the exact same spot. And it makes no sense to do that and to behave that way, because I know how I would have reacted. And it's just not helpful, and it's not an approach that is going to lead someone towards entering into and sustaining recovery. Now back to the book, wrapping up chapter 7 and step 12. Someday we hope that Alcoholics Anonymous will help the public to a better realization of the gravity of the alcoholic problem. But we shall be of little use if our attitude is one of bitterness or hostility. Drinkers will not stand for it. After all, our problems were of our own making. Bottles were only a symbol. Besides, we have stopped fighting anybody or anything. So that wraps the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Before entering into recovery, I had obviously known about the steps. I didn't know anything. Like I had never even Googled it. I had never taken the time to actually read out and understand the steps. And I will be completely honest with you. Once I was in rehab and going to AA meetings, I would hear the steps spoken out loud. I would read them right in front of me, and still I wouldn't connect with them. And so my hope in doing a more prolonged dive into each of the steps and my experience working through them and my engagement and my learnings and my approach, I hope that further depth can kind of play out what someone can expect as they think about entering into recovery. Again, one of my biggest barriers in seeking out help was wondering what life would be without alcohol, wondering what life would be, getting comfortable calling myself an alcoholic and referring to myself as an alcoholic. And I just want to stress and impart, it is the greatest sensation, the most incredible feeling, and the most beautiful and unexpected freedom that I ever could have imagined. So with that, that's all I've got. Love to y'all. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others who might find it impactful, and give us a rating through your streaming platform of choice. Ratings and comments help spread the work to others who are desperately searching for a solution. This simple action could have profound impacts on the lives of others. My hope is that my story can help those who feel alone in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and know that this life is full of abundant joy and wonder and is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you must endure. Until next time.